everybody. My name is Calynn Lawrence, and I am here to present my research that I have done for my doctorate in pastoral counseling. I have been in marketing and media for all of my career, pretty much marketing, media, and communications since I was 15 years old, and I am looking to use my people skills and my love for the community that I have developed to really make an impact as an educator, a researcher, and a counselor going forward. So that is what inspired me to do this project and take up this degree program, and I am very excited for what's to come. This is actually my second time recording this because the first time the recording did not save to my computer. So that is interesting, but I'm going to go ahead and get into it, and we're going to run it like this is the first time. So let's get started. The title of my project is The Wonders of Using Trauma-Informed, Spirit-Led Programming in Rehabilitating the Incarcerated and Reducing Recidivism. And the summary objective is exploring how an integrated approach to psychosocial services for felons could increase successful reentry to society, enriching community wellness and wealth. So, my introduction explaining the need. According to data released from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 68% of those released from federal prisons in the U.S. return within 3 years. This means that the federal recidivism rate at the time of this study was more than 2/3. And what does this extremely high recidivism rate cost the U.S.? According to the Illinois Advising Council of Recidivism, as a lifelong Chicagoan myself, one incarcerated inmate cost the state of Illinois alone approximately $151,662 annually when you factor in taxpayer cost and victimization. Nationally, in the U.S., over 23 million offenders incarcerated cost an estimated total of $15 billion a year to the economic class and $179 billion in government expenditures like police, judicial, and legal activities and correctional settings. What causes recidivism, i.e., someone getting out of prison and returning? The general answer to that is systemic oppression and inequities. In most cases, this is found in things such as lack of financial and educational resources, untreated trauma/mental illness/substance abuse disorder, lack of positive supportive relationships in their community, and the Black and brown prison pipeline. To illustrate my points of what some systemic inequities are that lead to people getting caught up in this cycle of going to prison, getting out, coming back, I'm going to go over several examples of systemic inequalities. The first one being research involving 318 women who were incarcerated rendered some very disturbing statistics. 25% of these women were victims of sexual misconduct at the hands of police officers. 77% of this number reported to have exchanged sexual favors for police to avoid being arrested, and 31% of the number reported being forcibly raped by officers. These occurrences have led to depression and PTSD. This is evidence that gender-inclusive racial initiatives need to be initiated alongside those for racial justice. Black women in prison show the worst health disparities than any group. Their white counterparts' health status is equal to that, give or take, of a non-incarcerated Black, which points to different types of health disparities in general. These health disparities among women are on the rise, seeing its greatest impact between 2017 and 2022. This leaves Black women more in danger from police brutality and inhumane health disparities than they have ever seen in years. All of this stemming from a higher average of police incarceration and interaction, either firsthand or witnessed by someone else, that causes distress, physical health issues, and adverse mental health and mortality. Second example. According to studies, life expectancy of whites living in a certain district of Washington, D.C. is 87 years old, compared to Blacks less than 15 miles away from their neighborhood, whose life expectancy is only 72 years old. Those incarcerated showed an even bigger gap, a horrendous gap. Based on social determinants, these deficits in the longevity of Black lives had less to do with biology and more to do with social and political laws based on structural racism. Among Washingtonians, Blacks make up 86.4% of homelessness, while making up less than 50% of the population. 80% of whites with high school diplomas are homeowners, whereas only 45% of blacks, regardless of level of education from high school diploma to doctorate degree, are homeowners in that area. 11% of DC neighborhoods are considered food deserts, with 51% of them being predominantly black communities, whereas white communities that are predominantly Caucasian residents make up 0 of those food deserts. These numbers are important because housing has a direct correlation to educational injustices, gainful employment, and incarceration levels regarding both civil and legal matters that play a major role in health disparities among minorities. A third example. An international study of female recidivism showed that social determinants which had the greatest correlation to recidivism included adverse childhood experiences, lack of education, minimal income and financial support, housing, unsafe neighborhoods, limited access to healthcare, and denied restoration of children or parental custody once being released. As a result, it was concluded that if there was to be a reduction in recidivism for women who struggle with these social determinants, changes must occur on 3 levels: social, political, and environmental. Adequately addressing the social determinants of health that women face is the key. These directly cause maladaptive behaviors that lead to imprisonment and continue once released if not properly addressed through things like treatment programs, community programs, government assistance delivered through political policies that are currently limited in how much they can help support these women. Very sad. A fourth example. The Ontario Human Rights Commission notes that between 2013 and 2017, blacks were 20 times more likely than whites to be shot and killed by police in use of force incidents. A plethora of research has proven the prevalence of police brutality in black and brown communities and its contribution to the school to prison pipeline, the black and brown prison pipeline. Recent studies show that the school to prison pipeline is rooted in harsh punishments at the school level, followed by inequitable municipal policies that affect black and brown individuals at an alarming rate. Yet, despite the implementation of police reform measures, such as body cams, civilian review boards, and increased police training, it has done little to combat the issue of police brutality against minorities, especially the very vulnerable youth population. Thus, these measures, by themselves at least, are not an effective solution. In 2015, 48,000 U.S. juvenile offenders were placed in residential and detention centers. These numbers disproportionately affected children of color. 70% of juveniles in the correctional system have learning disabilities. 66% do not return to school after being released. 50 to 52% of arrests were black children alone. Black children alone. 65% of black youths were tried and sentenced as adults with maximum security versus their white counterparts at 14%. At 14% versus the blacks at 65% for comparable offenses. Each of these statistics are linked in some part to police brutality, whether experienced or witnessed by the individuals who are already subjected to underfunded schools in black and brown communities that are low income, that are adopting zero tolerance policies that are among the root problems in facilitating the school to prison pipeline. Number 5, research shows that key factors that are necessary to reduce the school pipeline are rooted in critical race theory components. The most predominant factor is a trauma-based practice being utilized over exclusionary discipline models. This means that expanding the use of social workers and counselors in the disciplinary process who are able to offer social emotional trauma support to students rather than suspension or expulsion, which initiates the school to prison pipeline, would be a much more effective solution. In 2012, black males were suspended or expelled at rates of 48.3%, while their white male counterparts experienced 21.4% suspension or expulsion for similar offenses. Similarly, with black female students, they received the same discipline at 29%, while their white female counterparts were 9.4% for similar offenses. As as a result of a 2016 study done in San Francisco Unified District, in which the implementation of preventions and intervention programs took the lead in school discipline actions, creating a safe space utilizing trauma-informed strategies, there was a significant diminishment in aggressive behavior in students, and thus these punishments. This model has been adapted in several states and has also seen similar success in every state it has been adapted to. So what's the solution? The solution is comprehensive, holistic wellness programs for inmates in juvenile detention centers, prisons, and halfway homes, and those newly released into society that prepares them mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for a successful life outside. While installing this kind of programming will be costly, it will save the U.S. hundreds of millions of dollars overall in reduced law enforcement and court costs. It greatly boosts the economy and civic involvement with happy, healthy, employed, tax-paying people who would likely have a more positive view of the government and their value within society once stable and rehabilitated, as shown in tens of comparable studies. Now, an overview of my suggested programming for while inmates are currently incarcerated is as follows. The first pillar is ongoing mental and behavioral health care, starting with mandatory weekly group therapy sessions for all inmates. For any person, the experience of imprisonment alone will likely cause or worsen negative emotions such as depression, anger, and anxiety. Also consider the fact that in 2014, over 12% of federal inmates and 25% of state inmates on average reported having one or more diagnoses for chronic mental health conditions, and the number is growing. This creates a struggle for the jailed population to not only get the help needed, but maintain the delivery of services post-release. Developing medical and behavioral health protocols for those in the criminal justice system is beneficial for both the offenders and for public health safety. Weekly group therapy will help inmates learn to identify and navigate these feelings and conditions together so that they can learn proper coping skills to mitigate these emotions as a collective. Group therapy can provide them with a safe space to discuss their feelings and work through problems that they're facing with professional guidance instead of relying on their own uninformed opinions or the potentially negative influence of others who haven't been taught healthy habits for managing depression, anger, or anxiety. Next, mandatory weekly individual therapy sessions, plus any necessary medication for high-needs inmates who have moderate to severe mental or behavioral health conditions. Individual counseling in prisons in the U.S. have historically been reserved for only the most severe mental and behavioral health cases. Because of that, many moderate to moderately severe mental and behavioral health conditions go unchecked and unmedicated. Lowering the threshold for inmates to qualify for weekly individual counseling and daily medication if needed would significantly lower the impact of their behavioral and mental health conditions on their health, their conduct and compliance, and their ability to be successfully rehabilitated while incarcerated. In 2016, it was found by the Boston Consulting Group that anger management program participants had 51% reduction in recidivism. Drug program participants had a 45% reduction in recidivism. Sex offender program participants had a 44% reduction in recidivism. Moral reasoning therapy participants had a 16 to 35% reduction in recidivism. Post-secondary correctional education participants had a 27% reduction in recidivism. Lastly, those who sought and received mental health treatment post-release had a reduction in recidivism of 17% on top of the other numbers. Imagine these numbers amplified through a more holistic approach. The second pillar of my proposed programming during incarceration is a practical life skills and professional curriculum, starting with mandatory in-demand trade and degree programs available to all inmates based on a comprehensive career aptitude assessment that measures interest and abilities. All prisons should require inmates participate in supervised, relevant schooling programs that will allow for easier job placement and long-term financial stability. hosting a variety of certification and degree programs, promotes equity and buy-in from participants for those who may not have necessarily the foundational academic knowledge or the intellectual capacity or manual dexterity to complete other programs. Although the majority of inmates have less than a high school diploma, 70% of inmates have reported desiring a secondary education, with the sad truth that due to lack of resources and support, only 4% statistically will accomplish this feat due to barriers. With a projected 2/3 of well-paying jobs requiring a degree by the year of 2031, it is imperative that a plan to reduce this gap be implemented. Studies suggested that felons with post-secondary education are 48% less likely to reoffend. Programs like Project Rebound, who reported a less than 1% recidivism rate for those who completed their program, and in fact said that those who complete not only their program, but several others like it, go on to lead productive lives that include volunteering, careers, lack of public assistance, better health, and the ability to break the prison cycle. To keep costs down and goals affordable and attainable, prisons could offer associate's degree program in things like information technology, marketing, paralegal studies, and web development, as well as trade certifications in things like medical coding and billing, plumbing, and HVAC technician. All of these are fields that require a 2-year post-secondary education or less, have above average starting salaries, and have sizable projected growth for their fields over the next decade in the US. Having mandatory job training and or college courses for all inmates not only greatly increases their chances of finding gainful employment, but creates a culture of learning, self-improvement, and goal orientation within the jails. This would have an overwhelmingly positive effect on prisoners, both on the front end through giving them purpose and motivation, and on the back end, helping them obtain employment in a stable profession with a living wage. Because of this, it is important that selected programs are only available for professions with a high rate of success and ROI for students. Next would be mandatory life skills training. So most prisoners, especially those coming from marginalized populations, may not have been given the opportunity to develop critical life skills that are essential for functioning as a productive member of society. Having a program that covers topics like personal finance, i.e. budgeting, saving, taxes, civic involvement, i.e. political science fundamentals, how to vote and its importance, basic human rights, etc., and teamwork, like conflict resolution, critical thinking and planning, time management, etc., will give inmates invaluable life skills that they will be able to use regularly. The lack of these skills leads to ongoing issues for people in maintaining consistent employment, building healthy relationships, obtaining financial stability, and finding a sense of purpose, power, and value in contributing to their communities, thus causing them to reoffend. Studies have shown that effective prison education includes not just job training and professional academic knowledge, but also includes building skills to help them in everyday life. Research demonstrates that offenders have the best chance of successful reentry when a 3-pronged approach is adapted: enrollment in a correctional treatment and educational program, developing a structured reentry plan that includes a service plan with community connections within 6 months of release, and post-release community supervision and aftercare. The next intervention and pillar that I would suggest is prioritizing effective spiritual care and community cultivation. This piece, given that my degree is in pastoral counseling, is especially near and dear to me because I feel like it is an area of human development that is so minimally tapped, and I don't think that we as a society recognize its importance. The first thing I'd say is weekly interdenominational/non-denominational faith-based services and group activities led by an experienced credential lead chaplain. Having weekly worship services that have interfaith lessons, emphasis on interfaith, that cover all major religions: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, folk religions, so on and so forth, where inmates can participate, could provide an equitable opportunity for spiritual healing, growth, and enlightenment. Many prisons have chaplains but don't cater to those of non-Christian belief systems. As a result, those who are not Christian do not participate in any faith-based activities and progressively drift further and further away from the added peace, principles, and positivity that comes with having hope in a higher power. Prison chaplains report an approximate 50% reduction in recidivism when participants attend weekly meetings with faith-based activities that they personally align with. Studies show that correctional facility residents become more involved with religion for both intrinsic and extrinsic reasons. The intrinsic reasons range from love, forgiveness, and acceptance to simply wanting to be a part of something that relieves them from the thoughts of inadequacies and low self-worth. The extrinsic reasons range from perceived benefits, such as access to more resources and freedom to make connections that will aid them upon release. The second thing I'd like to propose within this pillar is a minister development program for inmates. Some of the best ministers are those who've had a troubled past themselves because they can relate to those who didn't always stay on the straight and narrow or had challenging life circumstances. Inmates who feel drawn to leverage their lived experiences with their passion for faith and love for their gods or God should be able to undergo a training program to be ordained as a non-denominational or interdenominational minister while incarcerated. The program should cover theological foundations across all major religions, as well as ministerial ethics, a leadership class, effective preaching fundamentals, and a communications class to hone their public speaking abilities. Participants who complete the program should be able to undertake this as a job during their sentence, the same way working in the kitchen or doing janitorial work is encouraged and looked at as something positive. This should be treated the same way. They could serve as assistants to the lead chaplain, who would be an experienced, credentialed non-inmate employed by the prison, and help them coordinate, facilitate, and organize worship activities. Research shows that 32% of prisoners are involved in religious studies, and substantially more have an interest in these kinds of programs. Ones who pursue this education also have noticeably lower recidivism rates than those who do not. My next proposal: expanded daily access to spiritual literature and content for individual worship, healing, enlightenment through a diverse library of religious texts in all prisons available to all inmates. Many prisons have libraries but are not sufficiently stocked in faith-based religious texts that cover all of the major religions. Bibles are usually an ample surplus. However, this does not fit the spiritual needs of a large population of inmates who do not subscribe to Christianity. Thus, those prisoners who are not able to engage in personal study or private worship are going to be much more likely to suffer spiritual unrest with a dwindling connection between them and a higher power that brings them comfort, healing, moral principles, and a hope in something greater than humanity. National statistics estimate that 60% of important decisions are made based on religion. 58.57% report faith being central to their thoughts and actions. 72.85% agreed that without their faith, their lives would no longer have any purpose or meaning. Next, expanded grant budgets and major gift opportunities for non-denominational or interdenominational prison ministries that provide inmates with consistent contact and communication with a qualified spiritual counselor or preacher. This can be done virtually, via telephone, or in person, but it is very important that they have voice-to-voice conversation and not just letter writing, so as to maximize the ministry's effectiveness. This will help them better progress along their individual spiritual journey and allow them to receive personalized faith-based counseling to navigate their life's challenges and draw closer to God in a way that best aligns with their spiritual beliefs and values. Now, an overview of my suggested programming post-release. First thing, ongoing mental and behavioral health care. I'd like to see expanded grant budgets for free ongoing substance abuse programs such as Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Expanded grant budgets for free ongoing counseling programs offered by nonprofit mental health organizations such as the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, and the YMCA's Wellness Network. I'd like to see practical reentry assistance, job placement being the first. Based on training programs completed while incarcerated, job placement assistance should be provided for inmates upon release to reduce the financial burden that increases the likelihood of resorting to illegal methods to make money. Those who gain meaningful employment are much less likely to reoffend. Most likely in the field of labor or hospitality, as statistics have shown, since these types of jobs are more lenient with guidelines in the hiring process. Next would be through personal finance and money management coursework to further reduce financial incentive for criminal activity and the need for long-term government aid. Personal finance and money management courses should be made a mandatory part of parole so that the newly released don't just have a steady income, but they know how to properly budget it. The course could be an automated virtual training with quizzes differentiating between essential and non-essential spending, where to find reduced cost items for regular purchases, credit building, long-term planning, investment for retirement, and other fundamentals. The next thing, housing assistance. Homelessness is one of the many issues that disproportionately affect felons. Providing housing assistance for them, such as group home shelters and income-based apartments guaranteed upon release so that they are not on the street, should be a major priority for those who don't have families that they can safely return to. Movements like Ban the Box, that fought to remove felony questions from job and housing applications that discriminated against those with prison records, have shown promising results. The next pillar of post-relief programming is making sure that they are, of course, receiving effective spiritual care and supportive community building. The first way being trauma-informed pastoral care made available in local churches and faith-based organizations with educational resources for clergy due to their limited psychology and sociology knowledge and the sensitive populations they serve. Firstly, should be a free crisis intervention training for all pastors, chaplains, and religious leaders. Second, a free mental health fundamentals training for all pastors, chaplains, and religious leaders. Third, expanded scholarship and grant opportunities for reduced cost psychology and counseling degree programs for pastors, chaplains, and religious leaders seeking to start faith-based therapy programs as an extension of their ministry. I myself would like to work on providing the first two. Once I have completed my schooling and passed my board certs, I would like to be the person offering education for free, accessible to our spiritual community leaders so that they can do the work that they are called to do in the most effective, impactful manner. Next, increased access to effective spiritual care and support for marginalized populations. That includes expansion of interdenominational and non-denominational faith-based organizations that welcome and support members of varying religious belief systems without the pressure to convert to a specific religion. That focuses on positive universal theological principles, i.e., being kind, being charitable, making a difference in your community, loving family values, and promoting peace. Offering ways to attend church or worship virtually for those who do not have the physical, mental, and/or financial ability to attend in-person services. Free live streaming platforms should be utilized at every public worship meeting. And expanded grant and major gift opportunities to reward churches and religious groups and faith-based organizations that actively implement and enforce a culture that is supportive of DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Churches and religious groups that not only welcome marginalized members, people of color, the LGBTQ, the formerly incarcerated, etc., but allow non-traditional individuals, women, the disabled, non-conservative political orientations, etc., to take up leadership roles within their organization with the ability to expand representation and perspective should be recognized and financially supported in this initiative because it is very important for equity within the spiritual care space. Studies show that having a strong faith-based community can reduce risk of substance abuse, criminality, and self-harm within the incarcerated population and the population at large. This is because it mitigates many of the characteristics that drive substance abuse, such as low self-worth, lack of regard for others, feelings of inferiority caused by prior deprivation of love and material sources. And rehabilitation is caused by focusing on spiritual virtues such as love, acceptance, humility, coping through prayer and meditation, and altruism. When individuals have a stronger pro-social introspect that can be gained through religion or spirituality, they are likely to spend more time in structured environments and avoid antisocial behaviors. Thus, it is very important that people of all backgrounds feel welcome in these spaces. Now, to give you an example of 10 subject matter experts of various demographics in agreement with holistic prison programming reform to reduce recidivism to support what I am saying for your own further research. Forensic mental health leaders. Dr. Craig Hanley, PhD, JD, Distinguished Professor and Researcher at University of California. Dr. Matthew Epperson, PhD, Director of UChicago's Smart Decarceration Project. Dr. Frank Porporino, former president of the International Association of Correctional and Forensic Psychology. Policy and law leaders. Brian Stevenson, JD, founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative. Jack A. Charlier, MPA, executive director of the Center for Health and Justice. Kara Ghosh, MPP, executive director of the Sentencing Project. Spiritual and theology leaders. Dr. Shauna Robinson Edwards, PhD, researcher and assistant professor at University of Warwick. Heather Rice-Minus, JD, President and CEO of Prison Fellowship. Dr. Leith Anderson, D-Min, former president of the National Association of Evangelicals, and Minister Ronaldo Hudson, BA, Education Director at the Illinois Prison Project. In conclusion, a plethora of scientific research has demonstrated how holistic programming can reduce recidivism and lead to happier, healthier people. Spiritual and religious care, coupled with proper health care and socioeconomic resources, have yielded powerful results and can do so for so many more of those who are incarcerated and newly released. With these programmings reaping many rewards for the individual, their communities, and society at large, we cannot afford to ignore the desperate need to implement whole person rehabilitation and reentry assistance for citizens ensnared in an inequitable, unjust criminal justice system, especially those of marginalized populations. Let us take the first steps in advocating for more effective and equitable legal system reform and fostering social justice and prosperity. Don't delay. Tomorrow starts today.